To order at 7:05 p.m. and we'll kick things off with the roll call. To my left.
Patty McCoy, thank you so much for coming out tonight.
I'm Cheryl Picard, and welcome everyone.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Lauren Christensen. Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Anupam Chugsidhu. Thanks for being here.
Good evening, Patrick Iho. Thanks for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Judy Westra. Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for your patience as you waited for us.
Good evening. I'm Saeed Pawar, and I'm a junior at Canton High School.
Josh Patterson, Plymouth sophomore, Student Voice and Action co-chair.
All right, Superintendent Merritt.
Good evening and welcome. I'd like to begin by introducing my assistant, Ms. Diane Robertson. We want to thank her for being here and taking care of our minutes and keeping us on track every day in this district. Also want to introduce Ms. Carly Reyes, and she is our Assistant Director of Communications and Marketing, and she's taking care of our technology needs this evening. I'd like to ask the remaining members of the team to introduce themselves to you.
Good evening. Kurt Tiskowitz, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services. Welcome.
Good evening, Beth Rail, Chief Academic and Innovation Officer. Thanks for being here tonight.
Good evening, Abdul Mayoon, Chief Human Resources Officer.
Welcome, everyone. Liz Vartanian-Gibbs, Assistant Superintendent, Student and Family Engagement.
All right, Saeed, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First agenda item is adoption of the agenda, approval of consent agenda, action item 240577. I'd like to ask for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the agenda, approve the consent agenda, action item number 24-05-77.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we'll go ahead and Vice President Christensen for that one. Dr. Merritt, can you walk us through?
Thank you, President Wilson. This evening, our consent agenda consists of human resources transactions since the last time we were together. We have new hires for your consideration, as well as resignations and retirements. We also have the approval of the minutes from our meeting on May the 14th, 2014, and the final reading of the following policies. 2210, that's curriculum development, 2451, alternative high school, and 5410, promotion, placement, and retention. We also have the following action items for your consideration. First, we have the annual resolution to consider the approval of the MHSAA membership. This is for our high school students to participate in MHSAA. In addition, we have a cooperative agreement between Novi Community Schools and Plymouth Canton. This will allow our students to participate in a virtual program that is offered through Novi Public Schools.
Thank you. Would any member like to remove any item from the consent agenda for future conversation discussion? Further? No? All right. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed say no. Carry 7-0. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Mondoon.
Yes, I'd like to highlight our retirements that we have for today. We have Jennifer Baker Berryhill, who retired from Smith as an elementary teacher. She has been working for the district since 2001. I would like to talk about Mary Demarest, who retired as a social worker from Pioneer. She has been working for the district since the year 2000. Christopher Rue, a high school assistant principal at Canton, who has been working for the district since 2012. Elizabeth Sexton was an ES specialist at Dodson, who's been working at the district since 1989. And Theodore Wilson was a teacher at Discovery, who's been teaching there since 2001. I think we could give them a round of applause. We also have a new hire today, Stephanie Pedovello. No, she's there she is. She's being hired as a computer technician. I know that will make Mark very happy. And we welcome you to Plymouth Canton.
Good?
That's it.
All right. All right, on to celebrating success, which will be led by trustee Kehoe.
This evening, the Board of Education will celebrate our school community with 2 awards. An Extra Miler Award for Kason Sharp, our truly outstanding student support coordinator at Miller Elementary School, and then another Extra Miler Award for Kathy Grotus, a dedicated and amazing psychologist and mental health manager for P-CCS. Let's begin with Kason Sharp. Over the summer, Kason consistently supported the Miller staff in finding the best new principal and teachers for the building, ensuring a smooth and worry-free transition. He gave so much of his own time and effort in this process. If a staff member or student needs support, Kason is always right there. He has a calm demeanor and helps to de-escalate any situation that arises. Kason has worked to enhance Miller's PBIS program and make the group both student and teacher friendly. He always goes the extra mile by employing himself above and beyond to make sure that Miller is staffed with the brightest and best educators. The students are so grateful and excited to see his amazing positive attitude every day and hear his goofy jokes, which is something they pointed out when they look forward to when they come to school. At this point, I'd like to invite Dana McGuire, media specialist at Miller, who nominated Kason for this award, and the principal of Miller Elementary, Cynthia Nichols, to come talk more about Kason's contribution to P-CCS schools.
Well, as you mentioned, I nominated Kason toward the beginning of the year, primarily for his work over the summer in going absolutely above and beyond for us. He was here in this table at this room countless times over the summer on different hiring committees for people that we needed, and wow, he brought us a great team. Along with during that time, he was also leading summer school. So it wasn't like he was just sitting back relaxing. He was doing summer school and he was here for us. He always has Miller's best interest at the forefront of his mind. And then as we began the year, he really helped Cindy to make a seamless transition. And so everything just flowed smoothly. Thanks to all of his time and dedication to us. He really epitomizes that role of student support coordinator. He comes in and a student looks and will be like, oh, yeah. And kind of like they can check themselves just by seeing his face without anything other than just seeing him. He knows they are supported. We as a staff know that we are supported, and so we really appreciate his dedication.
When I joined the Miller family last fall as the new principal, I thank my lucky stars for being able to serve and lead the Miller community together with Mr. Sharp. When you meet Mr. Sharp, you learn 3 things quickly. 1, he is a fierce advocate for students. Number 2, he has a contagious positive attitude. And number 3, he is open-minded to any solutions that are best for students and staff. I am proud to call Mr. Sharp my colleague and friend, and I thank you tonight for taking the time to recognize and celebrate our colleague, Kason Sharp.
At this time, I'd like to, excuse me, on behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to present Kason Sharp with the Mary Beth Carroll Extra Miler Award for consistently going the extra mile to support the students and staff of Plymouth Canton Community Schools. Thank you, Mr. Sharp, and would you like to say anything about this recognition?
Sure. They told me that I was going to have to talk, but then they told me that was a joke. So I guess it wasn't. But the Miller staff, the Miller staff is just a great team to work with. The students are amazing, and they really make it very fun to go to school every day and go to work every day. And it's just an outstanding team. So they make it easy to want to go and do everything you can to support them, because they will do everything they can to support you as well.
Next on our awards tonight is another Extra Miler Award for Kathy Grotus. Kathy is not only the psychologist and mental health manager for P-CCS, but she is also a strong advocate for mental health outside of her occupation. She has a positive mindset about life and provides her colleagues and students with the best support and advice. Her mentality is truly something to admire, as well as her hard work and dedication to the Mental Health and Wellness Fair. Last month, we held our third annual fair, and the community feedback was exceptional. Businesses were grateful to participate in such a wonderful event, and dozens of new businesses and organizations have expressed interest in attending next year due to the amazing turnout and Kathy's commitment to promoting mental health support. Since May is Mental Health Awareness Month, we're especially grateful to have Kathy Grotus in our district providing essential help and support for our students not just this month, but throughout the entire year. At this time, I'd like to invite Elizabeth Vartanian-Gibbs, Assistant Superintendent of Student Family Engagement, to talk more about Kathy's contributions to P-CCS schools.
It is with great admiration to honor Kathy Grotus for her trailblazing contributions to the field of mental health in Plymouth Canton Community Schools. Through her unwavering dedication and tireless efforts, she has transformed the way we understand and approach the psychological well-being of others. Kathy's compassion and empathy has been the driving forces behind many mental health initiatives in our school district. She has tirelessly advocated for destigmatizing mental health issues and creating safe spaces where others can openly discuss their struggles without fear of judgment. Her sincere approach, kind manner, and endless commitment inspires others to embrace mental wellness as a vital aspect of overall health. Kathy is a whirlwind of energy, tirelessly serving on countless committees and forever looking ahead to the next event that will enrich our district. Her passion is boundless, her commitment unwavering. She pours her heart and soul into every endeavor, determined to make a positive impact on our school community. Kathy's selfless efforts are an inspiration, igniting others with her contagious enthusiasm and drive to create extraordinary experiences that bring people together and uplift us all. Moreover, Kathy Grotus' dedication to promoting mental health awareness has been exemplified through her instrumental role in organizing and leading the Mental Health and Wellness Fair in downtown Plymouth. This monumental event has become a cornerstone of the community, providing a platform for education, support, and advocacy. Under Kathy's visionary leadership, the fair has grown into a gathering that brings together mental health professionals, wellness experts, survivors, and allies, fostering an environment of understanding and empowerment. Kathy Grotus has ensured that the fair serves as a catalyst for positive change, breaking down barriers and the stigma surrounding mental health. Kathy Grotus is a champion for our students, and the world is a much better place because of her.
Kathy, you're going to have to come up here. On behalf of the Board of Education, I'd like to present Kathy Grotus with the Mary Beth Carroll Extra Miler Award for consistently going the extra mile to support students and staff of the Plymouth Canton Community Schools.
I'm never at a loss for words, but I am right now. I am so grateful for this. I am honored and humbled by this. This is the testament of a caring leadership that's led by Dr. Merritt. She empowers, believed in me, believed in our team. She encourages, and she cheers us on. And so we could not do this without you. I love Plymouth Canton Schools. I love the people I work with, and
I couldn't work for a better place and with a better team of people. So thank you for this so much. Thank you.
All right. Hey, Kason, can we get one of those jokes that you tell to the students? You got anything? All right. I mean, they really built it up. All right. Congratulations again to both of the recipients. On to board committee reports and action. First up is the Student Performance and Achievement Committee led by Member Sadoo.
Thank you. We have not met since our last meeting, and we do have a meeting coming up next week, Wednesday. It will be a longer meeting, 5 to 7 p.m. in this room.
Monday.
Is it next Monday? Yes. Oh, that's right. We changed it. I'm sorry. We changed the date. It is next Monday. It will be a longer meeting than usual, 5 to 7 p.m. in this room. We will be discussing various forms of data as well as return on investment on certain programs that have been happening here.
Thank you, Secretary Sadoo. Policy Committee with Member McCoy.
So we met tonight at 5:30. We had a shorter meeting because the board had a closed session at 6:30. But we got through our old business, renaming existing facilities, mascots, and logos. Most of that had been, we had been talking about records retention, which we determined didn't really apply to this particularly. So we're moving that on, and we're going to continue with the records retention where that should go. And then field trips and overnight travel. We discussed that. I think we cleaned up the wording pretty well, so that should be coming to the board. We did online blended learning. We cleaned that up, so those are pretty good. And then we started talking about emergency removal, suspension, and expulsion of students. We have a lot of discussion around that. Our district council was there at the meeting. We've discussed, for instance, having additional training for the board on suspension and expulsions. And then also he's going to come up with some ideas for us because we need to have our policy. There are some things that don't line up to clean up the policy and make it a little smoother. And then we want to also have more of a discussion around what should or shouldn't be maybe seen by the board. But Dr. Merritt's going to provide us with some additional data behind that before we do that. So stay tuned. Our next meeting, so we'll finish our agenda next meeting and then add to it. And our next meeting will be June 25th, 2024. It is in the collaboration room down here. And I would also like to say thank you, Mr. Maydoun, who made sure that we have the address and room number on the agendas now so people aren't confused where to go.
Very nice. Thank you for that update. F&O with Treasurer Kehoe.
So our last meeting was May 23rd. That was last Thursday, and we actually met at the Salem High School in order to allow some of us to attend actually all the board members that are part of the committee to attend the Salem Honors Night that night. So it was immediately after that, so we had an abbreviated meeting and we got cut short a little bit. At that meeting, we reviewed an urgent Salem High School chiller replacement that'll be on the agenda for this evening, as well as an update on the 2024-2025 budget process and the expectations and the work that's happening with the state and State House, State Senate, and the state government on the funding sources there and some of the things that are happening as part of that. You'll see more of that come forward to the full board as part of the budget process. And lastly, we looked at the financial statements for the month of April. Our next meeting is Thursday, June 6th, and I believe we're actually meeting at 4 p.m., not 5 p.m. as per this agenda. And that will also be at Salem High School to allow us to attend the Starkweather High School graduation that evening. So we encourage the community to attend, both to attend the the F&O committee, but also the Starkweather graduation, which is one of the best experiences that we have as a district.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. Last is student voice in action with Sai and Josh.
So our last meeting was on May 20th, where we finalized our memo for the Student Handbook Committee regarding the student dress code. We then moved on to planning some initiatives for next year and discussed ways to promote SVA over the summer. And then
Our next meeting is to be determined, but it will most likely be in the fall. And that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Administrative reports and recommendations. First up, superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Wilson. I'd like to begin by congratulating the outstanding student journalist at PCEP's newspaper, The Perspective, for their strong showing at the 2024 Michigan Interscholastic Press Association Awards. 10 PCEP students were honored, and the paper won 17 awards, including 3 first-place wins. Salem senior Lucas Gentilia led the way, earning full or joint credit for 13 of the 17 awards, including all 3 first-place winners. Congratulations also to our Perspectives advisor, Ms. Donna Gatsky, for whom this would not be possible without her support of her students, and we want to also congratulate our students for their achievements. Also, we'd like to congratulate PCEP's STEM Academy students. They were able to shine at their senior showcase this past Thursday, when the Academy seniors presented the 2024 Senior Showcase. The event featured the senior capstone projects in our engineering, biomedical, and computer science pathways. They had over 80 projects that were on display that evening, which with each Academy's project theme centered around using innovation to solve issues or using technology to look to the future. This showcase is absolutely another example of our district's work to help the students of today become tomorrow's leaders. So we're so proud of their work in this space. PCCS's Community Education Department has released its summer programming lineup, including the return of the popular Safety Town program. Safety Town is a 5-day camp designed for students entering Young Fives, kindergarten, or first grade in the fall of 2024. The program teaches safety topics in a fun-filled atmosphere to help students make positive and safe choices. Registration for all community education programs is available on the community education page of the PCCS website. Also, our PCEP summer school registration is open. We'll have a variety of learning opportunities this summer with newly released details about the 2024 summer school programs that can be found on the school's page on the PCEP website. Students can choose from both in-person and virtual classes for credit recovery and for credit advancement. This, I believe, will be the last year that credit recovery classes will be free for PCE students. So we want to make sure that our students take advantage of that opportunity. Finally, we would like to congratulate our 2024 graduating class members. We had the pleasure of attending their honor ceremony this past week. Many board members were here to offer their support and congratulations. We appreciate that. Cannot believe it, but our students are going to attend their last day of classes this week. Their prom will take place at the end of this week, and we are so excited to just celebrate all of their major accomplishments. We have the Starkweather graduation, as you just heard, on June the 6th, and we also have PCEP schools. Their commencements will take place on June the 9th. We all want to come together. Let's give our students a round of applause. They've had incredibly hard work, 12 years, and a lot of success. And we just congratulate them and look forward to hearing about their success on this next chapter in their journey. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Merritt. Finance and Operations with Ms. Minnick.
Good evening. This evening, we will be covering a budget progress, update on our budget progress for next year's budget. I've come before you previously in February and in April to cover both a budget amendment mid-year for this year, But as part of that and as part of the outcomes of our transformation process, we've talked a little bit about enrollment history, enrollment projections, just some very simple baseline assumptions around where we think we are headed for next year. And I had reported out at that time that we were following somewhat of a calendar as we develop our budget. And so this evening we'll go through kind of where we are on that budget and what steps we have taken since the last time I came before you. So we always want to start our presentations, however, by a connection of our daily work and our budget and our finances to the Plymouth Canton Community Schools Dynamic Plan. So both with our strategic goal A and our strategic objectives F&O 1 and 2, we want to always align our financial resources, including state and federal resources, to areas of greatest need as support for individual students as identified through academic achievement data. And through strategic goal B, strategic objective F&O 4, we want to align our financial resources to the areas of greatest need, again, to support the social emotional needs of all staff and students. So together with those goals and specifically those strategic objectives, we're here this evening to align our financial resources in that way. Furthermore, to attain the dynamic plan action items through that fiscal responsibility and alignment of resources, we know we have certain resources that lead to certain activities for intended outputs. And with that, then we develop short-term, midterm, and of course long-term goals. So with that in mind, the overview for this evening, we'll take a look at that budget timeline that I just mentioned and see where we are along that continuum. I have for you this evening an overview, a very high-level overview of the school aid proposals, both from the governor's office that we talked maybe a little bit about back in February, as well as the House and the Senate budget proposals have been revealed. So we want to take just a high-level look at that and understand, maybe glean some priorities, some clues into what we might see in next year's budget to help us inform those assumptions as we build our budget. We'll also just take a quick overview of the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference that occurred in May at the state level, and that gives us a glimpse into what the State Budget Office, the House Fiscal Agency, and the Senate Fiscal Agency anticipate around revenues at the state level that will then inform, of course, our school aid budget for next year. So not that we want to get into too much of how the sausage is made, if you will, but we also want to just demonstrate how are we coming up with our assumptions for our budgets. So just a quick look at those, and then we'll, of course, lead right on into the assumptions that we have currently for next year's budget. So with the budget development timeline, we've shared this before, but here we are on May 20. We should update this for May 28th, perhaps. But on May 23rd, we had our F&O committee meeting, as Member Kehoe mentioned, where we took a look at the CREC and the House and Senate proposals, and we are updating those budget assumptions for next year. Of course, we'll come back again next week to review the actual budget proposal, the recommendation for adoption in preparation of a public hearing. And then on June 11th, we will have our public budget hearing on next year's budget, along with the first reading. And then we'll come back on June 25th for a recommendation for adoption of that budget. So as we look at the school aid budget proposals, the governor issued the executive budget proposal back in February. The Senate subcommittee recommendation was released on April 15th, and the House subcommittee recommendation was released on April 25th. So quite a time span there between the governor's release and then the House and Senate. The first question most people want to know is about the per pupil foundation allowance. How much is that going to increase next year? How much more money might we get in our district? So with that then, we see columns for the executive budget, the Senate, and the House. And the foundation allowance dollar increase proposed by the governor was $241 per pupil. In contrast, the Senate proposed $302 and the House $217. So as a percentage increase then, the governor is recommending a 2.5% increase, Senate 3.14%, and the House 2.25%. Those seem somewhat aligned, yet when you look at what that means in dollars for our school district, we see 3.9 million, 4.9 million, 3.5 million. So with that, along all those proposals, they all propose to continue a traditional blend of pupil counts. So it's a weighted count method where we take 10% of the previous spring along with 90% of the current October of the current school year to arrive at a weighted pupil count. And for this exercise, we're using our anticipated enrollment of 16,100. We're funded on FTEs, but just for simple math, so that we're all talking about the same number, I'm just using 16,100 as our anticipated FTE count. We know that won't be equal to the enrollment, but just for simple math, that's how we're moving through the presentation this evening. So the takeaway from this slide is to understand that the governor's proposal lands kind of right in the middle of the House and the Senate. Next to the per pupil foundation allowance, the next question is, well, how will the categoricals turn out? What other types of money might be coming our way? So the Executive, Senate, and House budgets all propose increases in the weighted funding increases for those programs and student needs that are more costly. So, for instance, at-risk program funding. Again, we have the Executive, Senate, and House columns. We see a wide array of proposals there. Percentage increases, 2.5, 8.9, 7.25. The dollar increases are substantial. But then we say, the executive sure seems out of whack with the House and the Senate. Why would that be? Well, under the governor's proposal, there's a new Section 25M, which is a program to support income-eligible students. And income eligibility is an at-risk factor. So if we think about that as perhaps a type of at-risk program, then we can see that those percentage increases maybe somewhat align a little better. Around bilingual education, we see some increases there that are significantly different. 7.5% under the governor's plan. Under the Senate, they plan to double those values, 100% of an increase. And then at the House, 12.25%. Great Start Readiness, we see again terrific increases there, 30%, 17%, 16%, and all of them expand eligibility parameters. And that's one step toward that universal preschool we keep hearing about, and the way that the governor and obviously the Senate and the House are trying to get there is by expanding those eligibility parameters. Special education funding saw a significant increase this current school year, so all three of those are just proposing to maintain that higher level of funding. So I think the takeaway from this slide is not necessarily to digest all the numbers, but just to demonstrate we're seeing a significant increase in categorical grant funding, but it's hard to tell what level some of those might land at because they're so disparate. Again, on current categoricals, now these categoricals we don't have to pay back. They're not in a sense of grant funding. This year, new this year, is an enrollment stabilization revenue that is allocated to districts that are still seeing some declining enrollment as a result of those COVID years. We're seeing that in our district. The House, the Senate, and the executive proposals, you can see that two align. Both say, let's just maintain the funding, and the House suggests almost a third of an increase in that funding. District transportation cost offset. That's a revenue to help offset costs. That was based on a kind of an ongoing study. Actually, they're adjusting that as we move through the school year. But all three propose, let's maintain that funding to help offset some transportation costs. So with those, you'll see I'm starting to move into maybe not a number or a numerical value, but rather to give you a sense of let's maintain it or maybe let's increase it. And you'll see that in some future slides. Next is the Section 147 MIPSR's allocations. This has gotten some traction in the news lately. You might have heard some things around the pension fund, the healthcare fund for retirees, all kinds of jargon and news stories. So with this particular allocation, we receive 6 different buckets of MIPSR's allocations currently. The most notable one is UAAL funding, and that stands for Unfunded Accounting Actuarial Liability. And that just means that we have statisticians that project when the pension and the healthcare funds might be fully funded. And there is currently an unfunded liability. That's all that means. So with that, we receive different types of allocations from the state to help offset those costs. The UAAL piece, specifically, that is called the stabilization monies. Those are the monies that we hear about that come to the district, and then we send it right back to the state. but we do have to record it on our books as revenue and as expense. So with the governor's proposal, she had suggested that because the state is anticipated to be fully funded on the health care portion for retirees, the districts no longer need that stabilization money, and let's redirect that. So it's that significant sum of money that you're seeing is going toward the other categoricals and the significant increases in at-risk and bilingual and some of the district transportation cost offsets and such. So with that, the reductions will be primarily achieved by removing, so OPEB, I apologize, means other pension, other post-employment benefits, which is the healthcare portion, and they are expecting that to be fully funded next year. It also is going to be achieved by reducing payroll growth assumptions, meaning behind the scenes, those statisticians project out actuarially what might payrolls be at the district level from which we will be contributing retirement monies. So they've decided to back down the growth assumption. Payrolls might not grow at the rate they're projecting, and then therefore the amount that the pension fund has to cover later will not be as great. And they're also proposing to reduce the UAAL contribution cap that districts have to pay. So it's those three items that would garner those three-figure $1 million savings that could be reallocated then to fund at-risk, English language learners, GSRP, 31AA, that's a grant we're receiving this year for mental health, and then special education, and to continue with free meals. So then we were waiting to see if that might show up in the Senate and the House, and it does, but in different ways. So all three do propose significant reductions in MIPSers and then significant reinvestments elsewhere. They're not all one for one. So it's somewhat confusing also because we're hearing, since the release of these budget proposals, another narrative in the news that has more to do with the amounts that employees pay into the pension system and other components that the districts pay in. And so those are separate conversations. And at this point, I think I'll leave it to say that we're all very interested to see how this might unravel and how it might come to fruition whenever the school aid bill is passed. So for now, because they're all such disparate discussions, and in fact, the amount of money that is transferred to schools for that healthcare piece, statute has to change in order for the funding to change. So it hinges on some state law. So the takeaway from this slide is that while all three are proposing some shift in MIPSers revenues to schools, we have no idea what that might look like. We know it could amount to a lot of money, but we're not exactly sure if then the funding will be reallocated in what ways, because we saw how all of those proposals were so different around the monies to allocate to at-risk and transportation and such. So does anybody have any questions on that before I move on? There's a lot of information on this slide and maybe some terms we're not really used to using.
So just overall, school aid budget, has it increased over last year, or are we seeing a decrease overall?
Mm-hmm. That's going to be coming up in the slides.
All right.
Around the consensus revenue estimating conference. But that's an excellent question because we need those revenues to support all these different programs and allocations, for sure. Okay, well, I'll keep going then. We're going to shift then into what are some of those budget allocations for academic and student support grants. So here I've gone to just saying if there's high, medium, or low support based on dollar values. So literacy, math, programming, those supports and interventions have high dollar allocations in the governor's budget. And then the Senate falls in the medium and range, and the House does not have the same levels of support as the other two. Around educator recruitment and retention, training and incentives, grow your own programs. Currently we're seeing for next year some student loan payments for educators. We see where the executive budget has quite a bit less support for that next year, whereas the Senate has probably the highest dollar value towards those types of programs and allocations, and the House falls in the middle. And then mental health and student safety, 31AA. In the governor's plan, that's recommended to continue, and then the Senate and the House drop off a little bit from there. But they also pose some different restrictions on those monies. So it wouldn't be fair to give a dollar amount because there's other strings attached, if you will. And then Michigan School Meals, that's the free student breakfast and lunch programs, all of those proposed to maintain that funding. So we'll shift into the consensus revenue estimating conference to understand what types of revenues will be garnered at the state level in order to support all these different allocations. So first up is just a look at the May consensus. It's got a square around it. And that consensus revenue is a discussion around fiscal year 2024 at the state level. So at the state, their fiscal year is still ensuing. Their end of the year is September 30. So these two consensus revenue estimating conferences in January and May, the State Budget Office, House Fiscal, and Senate Fiscal come together to say, are we on track with our budget for revenues, both in the state general fund and the state school aid fund? So in May, those numbers have shifted since January. And rather than dive into all these numbers, the idea that I want to share here is that the change from the consensus in January is a little bit startling. The general fund, it looks like they will come in quite a bit higher than originally anticipated, whereas school aid, a little less. But yet that change over the consensus there is small in a percentage-wise. But also at that same conference, they project out for next year, for fiscal 25. Again, we see, just looking at the change from the consensus, we see another pattern of growth in the general fund and a shift of a little bit less in the school aid fund. Yet we see those percentages, 2%, 2%. That's modest growth. And then they even look out to fiscal 26. And again, we see, 4% growth there in the general fund, but nominal growth of 2%, and in fact, there's a little bit of a lesser, that change has diminished since the previous consensus. So I just wanted to point out that through and through, the school aid fund for 25 and 26 is anticipated to grow by about 2% over the 24 numbers. So just a nominal growth. So President Wilson, I think that answers your question there. And then there's something that's not often talked about, I don't think, but there's something called a school aid index that is prepared at the CREC or the CREC. And that is just a function, it's just some numbers, it's a factor of the change in pupils and a change in the revenues. And when you weight those together, you come up with a school aid index for next year of 1.07. 1.0718, I think. I might need new glasses. But that indicates if it's above 1, that means that we should anticipate about a 1.7% increase in our per pupil foundation. But we saw the Senate, the House, and the governor all proposing in excess of 2%. So that caught my eye. And then for 26, again, that's more in the range of 2%, almost 3%. But I just have that in the back of my mind that based just on current revenues that are being projected out, as well as projected enrollment counts across the state, that's just really small nominal growth, and I'm not sure it aligns with the proposals we're seeing. Which also leads me to believe there must be something going on with MIPSers to help fund those allocations, right? Okay, so, there I was just pointing out all the things I was saying earlier about the percentages and the negative numbers there. So we'll skip over that. But they do also look long-term into 27 and 28. But again, just that same nominal growth of nearly 3%. So how do we take all the information from those 3 budget proposals, which seem to be all over the map, and take what we learned at the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference and try to develop assumptions so that we can build a budget that we believe in, that is prudent, not overly conservative, but is worthy of making some good decisions in our district during the year. We know that we need to adopt our budget by June 30 with a lot of variables that we won't know until the fall. We won't know our enrollment, school aid, although I have heard that the state is making a really good effort to have those to have a consensus budget and have school aid legislation passed by June 30th. Will it be before we come together for adoption of that budget? We don't know. But we also don't know where we're going to land this year quite yet. We won't have our audit until August, September. So we don't know really where we will land yet this year. We don't know our enrollment, and we don't know school aid on a per pupil basis, let alone categoricals and grants. So with that, we're developing some revenues as we move through this time of year. So we've projected our enrollment to land right around 16,100. That is a projected loss of about 101 FTE, and that comes at a cost. The foundation allowance increase per pupil, at this point in time, we're settling in with the governor's proposal, partly because it's middle of the road, and it's based on most closely to that 2% increase. And so much talk in circles of Michigan school business officials, the workshops that I attend, as well as the consensus revenue estimating conference, indicated some growth at between 2 and 2.5%. So that's where we're landing currently. And you can see that that would garner about $3.9 million in additional foundation allowance. With the weighted categorical funding increases, we will assume a 2% increase because that's aligned with the CREC, and we will amend all of that later should we have any type of increased funding as a result of any legislation around MIPSers. As opposed to demonstrating really large increases in planning for additional revenues in those spaces, it feels more prudent to move forward with just a not too conservative, but what seems to be aligned with CREC in terms of a 2% increase, and then amend later if needed. Of course, when we amend that budget by June 30, if the school aid package is legislated at the end of June or in July, we will certainly be responsive to that and take steps to prioritize that funding. And we're already having conversations so that when money comes or goes, we can already have those priorities in order. And then we are, of course, assuming a discontinuation of any federal COVID funding, no more ESSER dollars, and then we will just assume consistent levels for the federal, state, and local grants. On the expenditure side, our assumptions are that we will continue to align staffing with our enrollment. So as our enrollment diminishes, we will have to take a careful look at our staffing to be sure that it aligns and that we're being cost efficient, while maintaining our goals of the dynamic plan, of course. We're anticipating our class sizes just being consistent with the current year, and we are anticipating employee compensation increases as we are in employee negotiations currently. The hard cap increase of 1.3%, our MIPSers base contribution rate just a 0.02% greater than the current year, and then MIPSers costs we're assuming consistent with prior year, but we'll make those changes if necessary. Of course, any vendor contracts that might be multi-year contracts, we're incorporating any of those increases or changes over the current year to be included in the budget next year. And then we are striving to achieve about a $200,000 savings in our third-party transportation. We know that during COVID we had a really hard time attracting, retaining bus drivers, transportation personnel, and so we did have to go far outside to perhaps run some field trips or athletic transportation, those kinds of things. And we're at a point with our current provider, Durham, where we believe, and in fact we are, more fully staffed such that we can take on and bring back to our district those extra after-school hours types of trips. And what that will do is support the staffing so that Durham's staffing continues to be solid so that it can take on those other types of trips. Alongside with those assumptions around our expenditures, we have made some identifications of reductions that are needed because of our so-called funding cliff that we've talked about previously. This slide really is a duplicate of a slide we've seen previously around a target of reducing our expenditures of $2 million. So we have a list of different positions of reductions, but really it's protecting the general fund. We have shifted some roles over to be grant funded. It relieves the general fund. And as I mentioned, as we understand the outcomes of the school aid bill, then we'll be able to better match up priorities with any kind of funding. And so decisions around staffing or any types of capital outlay or what have you, those will all be, of course, concurrent and ongoing so that we can align those priorities with whatever resources are legislated. And then, of course, some other reductions from budget transformation. So all in all, we were able to identify about $2.4 million in reductions to general fund that shift some costs over to grants, but other eliminations as well throughout. So what are our next steps? Between now and next Thursday, we'll be continuing to refine those assumptions. We'll keep our ears peeled for any news, but we do intend to bring forward a final amendment for this current school year, as well as next year's original budget. That's a bit of a shift from our past practice. Often, as I understand, in the past, we would bring that final amendment at the last board meeting of June, but we're going to bring that final amendment so that as we project that ending fund balance and where we will land, we'll be able to segue right on into where we're going to start fiscal 25 and move through the next year's budget proposals. So we'll cover those at FNO, and then we'll bring those to the first board meeting in June, June 11th, where we'll have a first and final reading for the final budget amendment for this year. We'll also have our first reading of the original budget for next year, as well as a public hearing so that we can hear our community and our students and our staff and your input to that original budget. And then we'll have, of course, the first and final reading alongside that of the property tax levy, as we do each year. And then June 25th, we'll bring back the 24-25 original budget for your contemplation for adoption. We do have an F&O committee meeting in between those two, and we will discuss the budget if necessary. So those are our next steps. And that concludes the presentation. We've covered a lot of information. We've covered a lot of budget proposals and state revenue and a shift in our budget process, but I'm happy to take any questions you may have or feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So we'll start with Josh and Saeed. Any questions from your end?
Currently, no, but thank you for all your hard work and flexibility with this process.
Thank you.
I have no questions either, but thank you for the great presentation.
Thank you.
Member Wester?
I just wanted to make sure I understood. On slide 20, where you have budget transformation reductions, and you have moved 3.0 reading support to at-risk and moved 6.0 elementary student success specialties at risk. So at risk means that they are still employed, but their jobs are at risk, or? Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. I absolutely should have written at-risk grant funding.
At risk what?
Grant funding. We have a
Okay.
categorical called at-risk. That categorical from the state is revenues derived to support programs and services for students identified as at-risk.
Okay.
And we have some significant carryover in that grant for next year, some additional award monies, so we'll be able to absorb some positions within that grant next year.
Okay. All
Is
right.
that clear?
That is, thank you. Thank you for
Okay.
clarifying that.
Thank you. I apologize. It's good feedback. Thank you.
All right. I'm sure, I know I have more questions. I just can't put them into words at the current moment, so I'll pass.
Member Kehoe?
So just while we're on this slide, I wanted to make sure that we provide some more context for the board and the community that may be watching, is that this $2 million, a little more than $2 million that we're projecting to make in reductions is the start of the process that we have to do. Because as we look at our projections going forward, the quote-unquote fiscal cliff that happens with respect to the ESSER funds and the other things, we've been able to budget those ESSER funds and been able to manage our expenses to support those programs. But this year, this upcoming budget year, it's about $2 million that we need to save, but I believe it's, what, 8 for the
We're in-
next budget year?
Mm-hmm. We're anticipating about a $5 million reduction for the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
Per year?
Each year.
Each year.
Correct. So those are substantial changes. And some of the things that are being talked about at the state level, especially with regards to the MIPSERS process, may cushion that blow further for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hopeful that the state legislatures and the governor come through with some of that additional potential funding that comes from those MIPSERS processes, because they would really help offset these pretty substantial cuts that we would have to do in subsequent years. But
Yes, thank you for that clarification. And as a result of those ESSER grants, we see that fiscal cliff. But also, we've talked here at this board table around just the inflationary pressures on our budget. The costs of labor, the costs of goods, the costs of services have all gone up. So it's really a culmination of a number of factors. But
Correct.
significantly, COVID, kind of the springboard for most of that, yeah.
And that 2% that we're getting for the foundation allowance just barely covers potentially staff or contractual increases that may be part of that process.
It's also congruent to almost what we might garner had we not had enrollment loss.
Yeah.
So it's kind of making up the difference there.
Yep.
So we have some work to do on retention of students and staff. Yeah.
Thanks. A couple questions. One is trying to understand the special ed funding. We've heard special ed is not fully funded. I'm just trying to understand how has that fully funding of special ed impacted our budget, if at all?
Mhm.
Like what did that mean for our school district this school year and moving forward?
Certainly. So the concept is that in years past, the funding for special education it did not count every student FTE and fund it at 100% of the per pupil allowance. It funded it at different gyrations. The year before it was 75%, for example. So we've moved from funding a special ed FTE from 75% to 100% of the foundation allowance. On top of that, we're also receiving about 70% of a reimbursement on special education transportation and about 28% on special education costs aside from transportation. So back in the day, the maximum amount you could be reimbursed were those additional costs, if you will, the special education costs. So we were funded on 75% of our FTE, and then it was grossed up, if you will, to the max of those 70 and 28% reimbursements. Now we're receiving 100% of the foundation allowance plus those cost reimbursements. So I apologize, I don't have a dollar value for our district off the top of my head, but it was a significant.
Can we get that in board notes? Okay.
Thank you.
But that still doesn't cover the full cost that we incur.
No,
for
but I want to
special
see how much
education students,
more
so it's-
are we getting? Like, did that have a decent impact on the budget? Was it like pennies? I'm just trying to understand.
Mhm.
And of course, continue to ask for.
Every dollar matters.
Right, every dollar matters, but also continue to ask for, where's the gap? In terms of, yes, we got this much help, but we need, another 20, 30, 80% help. So just trying to get numbers
Certainly.
on that. The other
Thank you.
question I have is more around trying to understand where the discussion is at the state level with the MIPSR's contribution rate, trying to get that down. There was a lot of conversation that it was going to go through, and now I'm not hearing a whole lot. Do you have any pulse on that?
I have to say I don't. I'm hearing each day there seems to be a different news article about it, or a lobbyist group, or an advocacy group, or the business school, Michigan School Business officials weigh in, and so there's a lot of chatter. But most of it is to advocate to reduce the amounts that are coming to schools by way of retirement monies, rather than continuing to fund that healthcare piece that is anticipated to be fully funded, and redirect those monies in better ways that really touch the classroom and benefit the students proper.
Right. And also trying to understand how much increase does that mean for our school district?
Mhm.
If we go down 7%,
Absolutely.
right?
That's
Okay.
right. It could be significant. It could be not much. It depends
Right.
on whether that state law can change in order to allow the school aid fund to reduce those MIPSR's contributions.
Got it.
With the 7% itself, most districts would receive about $500 per pupil. With Plymouth Canton, it would mean about $8.2 million per year, every year, that we would not have to then pay back out
Got it.
into the system.
Okay, and that could go to general fund now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And so that is really the time to advocate. When you talk about where we are, the conversations are ongoing. And so with legislators, this is something that came out of the House after all of these discussions were made. So it's really a good opportunity. And all, like labor management, have come together and really advocated. I shared a letter with you because this really is a once-in-a-generational opportunity to right-size school funding. As you're seeing, we're not getting the large increases that we have been getting over the last few years, but this would be an opportunity to then, in the general fund, allow us to keep that money that has been going off to pay MIPSers for healthcare.
Thank you, that's all.
Just a follow-up question on what you said about the offset generating potentially 8.2 million.
Yes.
Do you see that as lessening the impact of the cliff, the financial cliff?
Yes.
Because, I mean, that's almost half, right?
Huge.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's definitely huge, and this is just an opportunity. When you look back at when this decision was initially made to stabilize that healthcare fund, that was back in 2012, and the idea was that we were trying to get that covered at 120%, and that currently is at 140%, and it was always the idea that that would be returned eventually when we made that 120%. So we're there now, and the advocacy is around now let the districts keep that money because it's a lot more flexibility. If that were to go into the per pupil foundation, then everyone would receive that same amount. Whereas right now, the idea is it going into public schools and not charter schools, for example, because they don't pay into the retirement system. And so that money being able to come back to the schools that pay into the retirement system, which for us, again, would be about 8.2 million each year. Huge.
And it could come in the form of all those different types of weighted allocations that we talked about, at risk, bilingual, GSRP. So we've seen some of those bucket list ideas, if you will, from the Senate and the House about how they might use those monies. It would be ideal and probably most flexible if it would come back in our foundation allowance, but it may come back as categoricals with some strings attached. It's hard to say how it may come back. And I think the advocacy letter was to say, let it come back in per pupil foundation amount so we have the most utility and flexibility with it.
But not foundation, which would go across all that receive
yes,
the
sorry,
foundation,
yes.
but come back to districts that have paid
Yes.
into it.
Because, just to follow up on when the law changed, what they did was that the law changed and they required that employees who want the ability to purchase retiree health care then had 3% of their salaries deducted for that. So that's where that money came from. That is, they have been collecting that from employees for years. So that is why a lot of the groups do not want it to go across the board, because it shouldn't go back to people who didn't pay for it. Like if it's going to do some good, lower the MIPSers rate, because that would help all of us.
Districts and employees alike.
Yeah.
Anything else, members? No? No questions, just a comment. You know, I appreciate the way that the district is handling the cliff, the visibility on it, the strategy behind it, knowing exactly what's coming and having a plan for it. It's something that we talked about as we were passing the budgets, understanding where the dollars are going, and even, you know, trickling down into SPA, understanding that we're constantly evaluating what's working, what's not working, so that we can sunset those initiatives that are not working and bring in initiatives that are, and also realize the cost savings. So great presentation, a lot of, you know, once again, great visibility on how we're handling the cliff, and it gives me a lot of confidence, so thank you.
Thank you.
I have no questions. Thank you very much.
I just had a question. So for the ESSER funds, is there like a list or like the programs that we would possibly lose, or that we have to figure out like what we got through the ESSER funds? What programs? Is there like a cost or what, so that we have to shift around or whatever?
And that was part of the transformation process, identifying what types of services and staffing and programs and equipment that we wanted to maintain, and what kind of things might we then carry over into a different type of grant funding, and what should we do away with entirely. So those conversations are going on. We started that with some of those reductions that you see on the list, and perhaps at another time we could talk more specifically about the ESSER monies. But that's a very fluid conversation, if you would characterize it the same way.
I do think we had at one previous board meeting when we talked through, there were some Allowable expenses from the general fund, I'll use the example of EL teachers or that we were able to cover through ESSER funds. So we did that to give the general fund some relief, but we always knew that those would come back to the general fund in this upcoming budget. So that has been realized. There were other new positions that were brought on for unfinished learning, and we always knew that those positions would just be for that amount of time in which they could be funded by those ESSER funds. So those would then end at the end of this school year.
On top of the free summer school programs.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So this will be the last year. That's a great point. Last year for free summer school programs as well.
This is the last year.
This is the last year.
Yep.
All right, any Member McCoy?
I don't have any questions that were unanswered, but thank you so much for this detailed presentation. It's a lot of information.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right. So we have, let's see here, consider approval of a resolution for Salem High School chiller replacement. This is what, Member Kehoe, is this what you referenced earlier?
Yep.
All right. Would you like to walk us through?
Thank you. I'll stay here while Tim makes his way to the podium. But to introduce this, we're recommending for your consideration approval to replace a chiller at Salem High School. Salem High School currently has 3 air conditioning chillers for proper cooling. Chiller number 1 has failed after exceeding its expected lifespan and must be replaced. Originally, the current bond program included the replacement of all 3 chillers. However, chiller number 2 has since been rebuilt. Chiller number 3 is undergoing reconditioning at this time. So we're recommending to replace chiller number 1. And the rationale and the quotes are included in your board packet. But we are proposing to award this contract for replacement to Train at a cost of $412,013 to be funded through the 2020 and 2023 bond series. This new chiller has a production lead time of 24 to 32 weeks, so the remaining 2 chillers will manage the building's cooling load this spring with programming adjustments.
All right, are there any questions? All right, just a reminder, this is the first reading, so if anyone has any questions, they can email them in.
I do kind of. So 24 to 32 weeks puts us into the fall. Will we be, so I think there's summer school classes and things like that that go on. Do you mean, when you say program adjustments, do you mean that we'll be holding those at Canton and Plymouth if necessary?
By program adjustments, correct me if I'm wrong, but those program adjustments are to allow the chiller to do the work of cooling the building in its entirety without the third. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, the
2 chillers can handle.
two chillers can handle the whole building. In fact, one of the chillers that we have at Salem is a great chiller, and that if it was just that one, except for the hottest days, it could cover the entire building.
Okay.
But having 3 provides us that fault tolerance in the event that there's a problem.
So it's not like we're going to
It's
have
no.
students
Nope.
suffering.
Nope, we'll be fine.
Okay, question.
All right.
Thank you.
On to action item 240578, consider approval of resolution to purchase P-CCS computer lab equipment. This is the final reading.
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution to purchase P-CCS computer lab equipment. Action item 240578, final reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed say no. Passes 7-0. Action item 240580, consider approval of resolution.
Nope.
Did I miss one?
Yep.
I'm sorry.
One.
Action item 240579.
Yep.
Consider approval of resolution to purchase 200 classroom document cameras, and this is the final reading as well.
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution to purchase 200 classroom document cameras. Action item 240579, final reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any questions? All in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed say no. Passes 7-0. Action item 240580, consider approval of resolution for local district vote on Wayne Risa budget. This is the first and final reading.
Mr. President, I move that we consider approval of a resolution for local district vote on Wayne Risa budget, first and final reading, action item 240580.
Is there a second?
Second.
Vice President Christensen. Any questions?
No, I wanted to thank the administration and the folks from RISA for providing this materials and helping to educate all of us about the budget process. There's been a lot of challenges that we've had with the RISA budget in the past, and they've really gone out of their way to help us to understand it.
Fantastic. All in favor say yes.
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 Any opposed say no. Passes 7-0. On to citizens' comments. I see none. So we will go on to follow-up board questions. None?
So we had no follow-up board questions from previous. I did capture the request for special education. What does the 100% funding mean in terms of numbers? Did I get any more questions from this evening?
No, I can ask F and O. I can talk. Yeah, perfect.
All right. So I do know we need to lock down a couple of dates.
For what?
Superintendent evaluation. And I think that's it, right?
Okay, we
Because
have
we
something
did
tomorrow.
move the business meeting to the
23rd of July.
23rd of July, from the 16th to the 23rd of July, so that's locked in, the business meeting, our annual business meeting. And so the superintendent dates are June 5th, June,
Don't we have one tomorrow?
That was one that was proposed, but we didn't get a lot of response
Got
or
it,
traction
got
on,
it,
so we're
okay.
looking out into June now at this
Thank you.
point.
so the three proposed dates that Vice President Christensen sent out were June 5th, June 13th, and June 18th,
All at 5:30.
all at 5:30.
I got the 5th. What were the others?
The 13th
Okay.
and the 18th.
And I belatedly replied just this evening to say that those 3 dates are good for me.
And you said they were all
I-
they're good.
I cannot do the 13th.
You can't do the 13th?
No.
Sorry.
That's okay. You told me verbally.
So the 13th, you are not available. Okay.
And I sent you my dates,
I
right?
saw yours, yes. So I believe you have a conflict on the 18th.
I could do the 18th maybe. Well, no, I really can't. I really can't.
That's fine.
No.
We only need one, right? So the
No,
fifth-
no, all three.
We need two.
We need 2 meeting dates.
Self-evaluation and then evaluation.
Last year we had 3 dates. I know that the evaluation tool was newer, so we extended that review process into 3 meetings, but I think traditionally we've had
Two.
2 meetings. So
Okay.
we were planning 2 with a placeholder for a third if we felt we needed it.
If it works for most, that's okay. Like, just keep with the dates you have, and it looks like most people are available those 3 days.
Well, if we only need 2, oh no, you can't do the 18th,
I
right?
can't do the 18th. And the other ones were which ones? 5th?
5th and 13th.
13th.
Can everyone do the 5th and 13th except for Member Sidhu?
I can, yes.
I can.
Okay. And Member Sidhu, you said you're comfortable doing us doing the 13th review
Without me.
without you? Okay. Dr. Merritt, are you comfortable with that as well?
The same?
Okay. So let's lock in the 5th and 13th. I'm a little disappointed we're not doing the 18th because my birthday's right around there, so I was gonna make everyone break
Yeah,
the 8th.
it's gonna be a birthday party for
Presidents,
President
there,
Wilson.
we were gonna throw a little party.
That does not mean we can't get together to throw you a
That's
birthday
There you
party,
go.
okay?
There we
We
go.
just don't have to do it as part of the
Special meeting.
That's
superintendent.
right,
Yeah.
that's right, I like it. All right, well, we will lock in the 5th and the 13th.
Okay.
Any other 5:30?
5:30.
Okay.
Any other business? All right, we'll officially adjourn at 8:18 p.m.